The sister who is the bride's friend demands to become the maid of honor instead of me at our other sister's wedding. I'm 26 years old. My older sister is 28 years old and asked me to be the maid of honor at her wedding, which is happening next month. However, our younger half-sister, 21, threw a tantrum. For context, my biological sister Laura and I grew up with our mom without a dad for about the first 5 years of my life. It was just the three of us until Mom met my stepdad. They got married, and soon after, Mom gave birth to our younger sister, Carrie. My stepdad turned out to be a wonderful person. Before he came along, Laura, Mom, and I lived in a tiny apartment and had little money. But we were still happy because we had a roof over our heads and food on the table. My stepdad had a great job, so after he and Mom got married and Carrie was born, we moved into a big house that, compared to our apartment, felt like a mansion. We started getting expensive gifts for Christmas and birthdays. Carrie grew up in comfort and abundance. Although Laura and I also enjoyed some of that, it didn't spoil us much because we remembered what it was like to save on everything and live with little. Mom is still frugal, and we happily shop at thrift stores or make things by hand like we used to. In that sense, Laura and I are very different from Carrie. Carrie was always spoiled, but not in the sense of throwing fits and demanding a new car from Dad. She might ask for a $500 birthday cake and get it, only buy brand-name things, and if she didn't get something, she'd sulk for 3 days. Strangely enough, she still lives with Mom and my stepdad, has no job of her own, and it seems everyone is fine with that. Last year, Laura's boyfriend, whom she had been dating for 6 years, proposed, and we were all thrilled. He's a great guy, and we all love him. When Laura first got engaged, she gave me, her friend Charlotte, and Carrie little boxes with beautiful earrings that said, "Will you be my bridesmaid?" Mine said, "Maid of Honor." We were thrilled and started discussing ideas for colors, cakes, and so on. But Laura and her fiancé decided to wait a year to save money and work out the details. 4 months ago, Laura announced that she was pregnant, and the whole family was overjoyed. Everyone except Carrie, who remained silent and didn't say much. Laura then explained that she and Alan had decided to get married in 2 months, inviting about 30-40 people to have the wedding before the baby arrived. My stepdad offered them $10,000 so they could have their dream wedding, but given the circumstances, they decided to use most of that money for a house they had found, and my stepdad agreed. Charlotte, Mom, Laura, and I threw ourselves into wedding preparations. It was a lot of fun, except that Carrie showed almost no interest from the start. When we discussed plans, she was either staring at her phone or looking bored. Eventually, Laura talked to her and asked her to be more involved, and Carrie agreed. When we went to a dollar store to buy wedding decorations, Carrie scoffed and said, "Decorations from a place like this are so tacky." We ignored her and went on. When we asked her to help make invitations by hand, she complained they'd look like they were made by kindergartners and walked away. Recently, we went dress shopping. Laura said that as bridesmaids, we could choose any dress as long as it was blue, and we would pay for them ourselves. Mom, Charlotte, and I went into H&M and found beautiful blue summer maxi dresses in different styles. Mom's had lace, mine was cotton with a floral print, and Laura loved them. Of course, Carrie wanted to buy a designer bridesmaid dress for $2,000. Mom said that was ridiculous, especially since even the bride's dress didn't cost that much. Naturally, Carrie pouted and whined until Mom gave in, so we went to an expensive bridal salon. Carrie immediately found a pale pink dress she absolutely had to wear, but it cost $1,000, and Mom flatly refused, especially since it wasn't blue like the other bridesmaids' dresses. Carrie then declared that blue was the stupidest color for a bridesmaid dress because we didn't live near the ocean. In the end, we left, and Mom lectured her, reminding her this was a budget backyard wedding with a barbecue for just 30 to 40 guests, so she didn't need a $2,000 designer gown, no matter how pretty it was. A few days later, Carrie said she had found a blue dress in her closet. We were relieved, but when we got to our parents' house, she came out in her old high school prom dress, a big glittery ball gown covered in rhinestones. Like many people after school, she had outgrown it, and her chest was practically spilling out of it. On top of that, she wore a tiara with sparkling stones that she said she had bought especially for the wedding. Mom and Laura stayed silent, but I finally said it was completely inappropriate to wear a dress that looked fancier than the bride's, never mind showing that much cleavage and wearing a crown. Who did she think she was? Carrie crossed her arms and said, "Well, I'm the maid of honor, of course I'll wear a crown." At that point, Laura said, "Maid of honor? I asked Emmy to be my maid of honor. You and Charlotte are just bridesmaids." This sent Carrie into a rage. She screamed, "What do you mean I'm not the maid of honor? You said I was when you gave us the gifts. I got earrings because I'm the maid of honor." I don't know if Carrie really thought she was the maid of honor for a whole year, or if she just ignored reality, but all year I had been the maid of honor, and Carrie had never said a word. Until now. This triggered the worst meltdown I've ever seen. She screamed, cried, tore off her crown, and ran around the room until my stepdad came in to see what was happening. Between sobs, she told Laura that her wedding was completely wrong. She said that instead of buying that awful brick house Laura and Alan wanted, they should have spent the $10,000 on a beautiful wedding, because that's what the money was meant for. She also said getting married while pregnant was the stupidest thing ever, because in a wedding dress, she'd look like a fat swan. Then she went back to ranting about how blue was a dumb color since we didn't live near the ocean. By that point, I think she was just making things up. My stepdad tried to calm her down, but she shouted that if she wasn't going to be the maid of honor, then nobody would be, and she wouldn't even go to the wedding. Laura was in tears, and I was ready to slap that little witch so hard her crown would stay on the floor forever. But before I could say anything, Laura said, "Fine, you can be the maid of honor. You win." Carrie stopped crying, smirked slightly, and went to her room. Mom and Dad started arguing, Dad saying you can't do anything about a 20-year-old's behavior, and Laura went to another room to call Alan and discuss possibly canceling the wedding. I was so furious that I went to Carrie's room and saw her sitting at her laptop ordering that hideous pink dress for $2,000. I was so stunned by her nerve that I couldn't even speak. I just turned around and left. Downstairs, Laura was sobbing into the phone, my parents were yelling at each other, and Carrie was happily sitting in her room spending money on useless stuff because she got what she wanted. I don't think I've ever been so angry. It's a shame Laura doesn't have a stronger backbone. If I were her, I'd tell Carrie not to even think about coming to the wedding if she was going to act like this. I just don't know what to do now. I'm also hurt that Laura gave her the maid of honor title so easily just because Carrie threw a tantrum. I don't know what to say or what to do. Update. I want to share an update about what happened today. It's been 3 days since Carrie's meltdown, and I've spent that time thinking and reading your advice. Early this morning, Alan, Laura's fiancé, called me and asked if I could come to see Laura because he was fed up with Carrie and something needed to be done urgently. I felt relieved to know I wasn't the only one frustrated, so I immediately went to Laura's. Laura was lying on the couch in pajamas with unwashed hair, looking like she'd been crying for days. The sight broke my heart, and she immediately apologized to me, saying she didn't know what to do next. Alan suggested the three of us sit down and talk to Carrie, but Laura immediately refused, saying she couldn't handle more yelling. I agreed that yelling was the last thing Laura needed right now and suggested that Alan and I talk to Carrie without her. Laura was still worried, not wanting Carrie to feel attacked. After a long discussion, Laura decided she wanted me to talk, to Carrie alone without involving our parents. Together with Alan, Laura made a list of points I needed to cover so the conversation wouldn't go off track. For example, explaining that it's never okay to yell at a pregnant woman under any circumstances, how disrespectful it was to criticize someone else's wedding, to call names, and most importantly, to use a meltdown to demand the role of maid of honor. Also decided to tell Laura about the bachelorette party that Charlotte, the other bridesmaid, and I had been planning. A fun sleepover for her in a few days. Laura's face lit up with joy when I mentioned it. I told her it was supposed to be a surprise and that Carrie had been invited, but given that the party was going to be at my place, I no longer wanted her there. I asked Laura how she felt about that, and she said it was perfectly fine, even suggesting we invite her other friend instead. I agreed, and after our talk, I headed to our parents' house to see Carrie. When I walked in, Mom asked why I was there. I told her I needed to speak with Carrie. She looked around, lowered her voice, and said I should probably leave because the last 3 days had been peaceful, and no one wanted more drama. I apologized, but said that things were far from resolved. Just then, Carrie walked into the kitchen and asked what I was doing there. Mom tried to smooth things over, saying, "Oh, Emmy just came by for something, but she's leaving now." I said, "No, that's not true. I came to talk to you privately about what happened the other day." Carrie clearly wasn't happy, and Mom's face turned red. But Carrie and I went to her room to talk. I immediately told her it was completely unacceptable to raise her voice and yell at a pregnant woman because it could harm the baby. Carrie scoffed and said, "No, that's not true. Don't make things up to guilt me." I asked what she meant, and she said, "The baby won't be harmed just because I raise my voice. The baby doesn't even understand what's going on. You're just making this up." Honestly, she was unbearable. I decided arguing was pointless and said that pregnant or not, it was Laura's wedding, not hers, and her insults and harsh criticism of the decorations were childish and unacceptable. I told her that throwing a tantrum to get her way was the most immature thing she could have done, and if the roles were reversed and I had taken the maid of honor role from her, she would have lost her mind. So why did she think it was okay to do this to me? Carrie said I was pathetic and just jealous, adding, "There's no real problem here, you're just jealous Laura picked me." I told her that wasn't true. Laura had originally wanted me as maid of honor, but agreed to make Carrie one to stop the fighting. Carrie smugly said there was nothing I could do about it now and that I should just accept it. I told her she was no longer invited to the bachelorette party and that Laura also didn't want her there unless she apologized to me, Laura, and our parents for her outrageous behavior. Until then, she wasn't welcome in my home or my fiancé's. Suddenly, Mom burst into the room, I suspect she'd been eavesdropping, and exploded, saying I had no right to ban Carrie from the party, or my house, and that I was only doing it out of revenge. She said I was creating unnecessary drama, and that at least Carrie hadn't intended to hurt anyone a few days ago, whereas I was doing it deliberately now. At that moment, Carrie started crying, saying I always humiliated her and treated her unfairly. Mom went to comfort her, telling her she wasn't to blame. I noticed our stepdad standing at the door. I asked if he saw that Carrie had bought a $2,000 pink dress for the wedding. He looked awkward and said everyone was just stressed and didn't mean what they said, that sisters fight but would make up by the wedding. At that point, I'd had enough. I told everyone I was leaving. Mom said the conversation wasn't over, but I replied that it was. Unless Carrie apologized to me and Laura, I wouldn't talk to her again. As I left, I heard Carrie say she had nothing to apologize for. I was hurt, angry, and had a pounding headache, so I went to the pharmacy. Now, about where I might have crossed a line. In my previous post, I didn't mention this because it seemed irrelevant. But Carrie has been dating a guy named Noah for about 6 months. He's 27, a devout Christian, and genuinely a great guy. We met at the local university about 2 years ago, had many classes together, and became friends. He and Carrie have a lot in common. They both love animals, and he often fosters them, while Carrie once considered becoming a vet. In early January, Noah moved back to our town, got a job as a pharmacist, and started dating Carrie. We were all happy because he's a good person. Due to his beliefs, he wants to marry and have kids soon, and he's mentioned hoping to propose by the end of this year. Carrie is his first serious relationship, which might explain his eagerness. When I went into the pharmacy, I was surprised to see him there because I didn't know he worked at that location. He waved and, noticing the painkillers in my hand, asked if I was sick. I said no, just a headache from wedding stress. He was surprised. Carrie had told him everything was fine. This annoyed me, so I asked if she hadn't told him about what happened a few days ago. He knew nothing, so I gave him a brief rundown. The insults, yelling, picking her own dress against Laura's wishes, and becoming maid of honor through a meltdown. Noah was shocked and asked, "Are you sure? I know Carrie, she hates yelling. She really had such an outburst?" I said yes, unfortunately. Then I suggested he recommend she see a therapist. He knows many. I also mentioned she might even need medication for possible bipolar disorder. I told him I was cutting her out of my life until she changed, and that if I were him, I'd think carefully before proposing. He stayed silent, and I left. When I got home, Alan and my fiancé were playing video games. They asked what happened, and I told them. They both thought I did the right thing, including warning Noah. Later that evening, I got countless angry messages from Carrie and Mom accusing me of telling Noah things just to stir up conflict. I blocked their numbers for a while. As for Noah, Carrie keeps him on a short leash, so I doubt he'll act drastically even if he knows how she behaves when upset. I still don't feel better. I feel hurt and betrayed, like I have a lump in my throat and chest. Laura later called me and said she truly wanted me as her maid of honor, but chose Carrie for family peace. I'll swallow my pride and support my sister no matter what, and love my future niece or nephew. Final update. About 2 weeks after my talk with Carrie, I'd blocked Mom, Dad, and Carrie everywhere, hoping things would calm down. They didn't. One night, around 2 a.m., Carrie called my fiancé. He ignored it, but she called again and left a voicemail saying it was urgent about Mom. We rushed over to find Mom acting erratically. Carrie said she didn't know what to do. Stepdad wasn't there, they'd argued, and he was at a hotel. Family photos were knocked over or broken in the hallway. In her room, Mom was watching TV and slurring her speech. Carrie said she'd been acting strange for the past hour. Mom wasn't yelling, just talking nonsense. I asked if she was drunk. Carrie wasn't sure, but said she'd had wine earlier. Apparently, Mom had been saying bizarre things then, screaming about broken families and photos, which explained the mess. My fiancé decided to call an ambulance. We found out she was on anxiety and depression medication I didn't even know about. The doctor later said the stress, fights with stepdad, alcohol, and possibly incorrect medication use had caused a breakdown. Physically, she was fine, but was kept in the hospital for a few days. On the way home, Carrie told me Laura had texted her saying I was still maid of honor and that the decision was final. Laura wouldn't answer calls or messages from our parents, or Carrie. I was shocked Laura hadn't told me. Carrie said she might never consider me her sister again because she felt betrayed. I didn't respond. I was too tired to argue. Since then, I've been looking for a family therapist and plan to contact Mom's doctor for advice. I told Alan what happened so he could inform Laura without stressing her. Wedding day. It was held on our family farm with about 50 guests. Carrie wore the pink dress after Laura gave in, plus the tiara from her prom. A few days before, Carrie posted on Facebook about how toxic her family was, clearly aimed at me, so I blocked her. At the wedding, she got drunk, sang, danced, and tried to get attention, but nothing too crazy. She ignored me completely, making a scene whenever I entered a room. Her boyfriend proposed to her afterward and messaged me, asking if I'd reconcile and help plan their wedding. I said I still wanted to be his friend, but couldn't have contact with her. He hoped we'd make up someday. I haven't spoken to Carrie in months. Laura's fine, still in touch with Carrie. I keep my distance from Mom and stepdad and no longer have them on social media. For those saying I shouldn't have mentioned possible bipolar disorder, you're probably right. I meant no harm. A close friend of mine has it, and I've seen similar patterns in Carrie. My friend even suggested it might be the case, and I told Noah thinking he might help her seek treatment. I'm not judging people with bipolar disorder. And I'm not claiming I'm blameless. I know I've had my share of conflicts with Carrie. I usually try to avoid their blow-ups, but this time things spiraled.